Hi, and welcome to Black on the Mat, the space where culture, community, and yoga intersect through our lived experiences. We're your host. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Seisha. Join us on this journey to bring representation and shed light on often overlooked stories on the yoga mat.
We're creating an accessible roadmap into yoga for Black people, building a community in this predominantly white space.
And letting folks already into yoga know that we're here.
Thank you for coming back to the mat with us. Welcome to Black on the Mat. Today we have on Jay, one of my friends for a good long time in this yoga world, and just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to using THC and CBD and infusing it in your practice. And I feel like this is a space where our community, we've already got the connection to THC and CBD. And I feel like this, it's been taught very gimmicky and spoken about in that way, but like you really have made it your business to learn and teach and share yoga practice with weed as a part of that practice to help you grow. And I would just love it if you could tell us how you got into this and, what motivated you to really delve into this.
For me, well, thank you first of all for having me, you guys. It's been a long journey, I feel like. For me, it started just me doing what I normally do in my regular practice. Like in the beginning, I was just looking for a way to kind of help ease a little anxiety that I would have, like going into certain spaces and not always feeling welcome. And just being like, well, you know what, maybe I should just practice on my own. And then I started noticing like, oh, I feel like deeply connected. Like when I kind of like meditate and slow down and just allow myself to just sit in silence for a little while. And THC was very heavily a part of that process for me, especially once I relocated to Jersey and was just feeling a little, like trying to find my place and figure out what works for me. And I was just doing a lot of heavy meditation and I utilized a lot of those benefits. And then I realized like, if I'm doing this, I know other people are probably doing this. So, and they may not have like all of the knowledge behind it. So that's why I started doing research and being like, well, how is this actually beneficial? So I'm not just coming here presenting something to somebody like, yeah, let's just smoke and do some yoga. Like, is this actually beneficial? And the more research I started seeing, the more I realized like, oh, yeah, this is actually deeply relaxing. And then I came across a book, Cannabis and Spirituality. And I really was excited because I was like, this is perfect. Like, so I read through the book, got super excited, and then was like, oh, so now I have like the historical aspect, especially the yogic historical aspect of infusing plant medicine in your practice, your asana practice. And I was like, oh, our people could use that. And for me, I felt like at the time, like there was a lot of benefit of just bringing people to the mat. And kind of at first for me, it was, well, you can smoke too. And then it was like, oh, really? You could do that? And people got curious and started asking the questions like, how's this going to work? Am I going to be smoking the whole? I'm like, no, like, that's not how I wanted to do it. And as it started developing, people started kind of talking about it and attending classes and realizing like, wait, there's actual facts and information for this. Like, I didn't know that that THC could have these components. But then if I delve a little bit deeper, then like CBD might actually be what I need. Or like, I don't like smoking. So like the fact that you have like honeys and we can do teas and I have other options outside of just smelling like smoke, because that can be unattractive for some people. And they're like, I don't want to do that. Is there another option? And being able to present those options, give people a chance to just see it in a different light has been very rewarding, because I think a lot of people think that like it's solely for one thing. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna be couch locked or I can't function. And I'm like, no, if you find a strain that works for you and utilize it that way, and you don't have to smoke a whole joint or a whole blunt or whatever your choice of smoking usage is, tool of choice is, like, I can literally take, at this point now, especially, I can literally take 2 or 3 hits and I'll be good for a good portion of my day. I don't need to overindulge. And I think people don't realize that, like, it's not about overindulgence, because anything when you're overindulging can turn into something else. And with the right information behind it, the right tools, the right knowledge, and then just the intention behind it, that makes it more of a spiritual practice, as opposed to just something where, like, hey, let me see how many joints or whatever I can like smoke in a day. And I used to be that person. Like, I'd be like, oh, I got 15, 20 joints today. Like, yes, and I was still productive. Like, and it's how were you doing that? Like, because now thinking about it, I'm just like, there's no way. There's no way. But that's, I think more people start to realize that, more people start to get more information. And now, it's quickly becoming more recreational. That has also been very helpful, because the more states that start legalizing, the more this information is more readily available to the consumer.
So I'm curious, Seisha, I know you've also done this as well. What was your first experience like?
I would say, my experience buds similarly to Jay's, like more like, so I was diagnosed with PTSD from the classroom a few years ago. And so when that happened, I don't necessarily want to be on a whole bunch of heavy medications, but I was prescribed THC. And, so it became a part of my life as far as like the regular small dosage. I started with gummies mostly. And then, but yoga was already a part of my life before that. Like, it was just literally traumatic experiences that happened in one school year that I was just telling you about the other day. But from that, like, so it being a part of my body, noticing, just like Jay said, that relaxation, that ease of anxiety, that space. And yoga, like I said, at that point was a part of my life. Like, especially anybody that's followed me for a few years, my mats stay rolled out, right? So like, if I randomly just come to this space and I'm like, yep, I just need to flow, I just need to move, I'm just gonna do that. And that became the space where it happened. And I was like, wow, no, this really feels really good. Like, I feel like I could just really slow down and feel good about practicing this way. And then, so to the point where I did take a couple of classes, I attended some events, and then in New York, I taught some events before I moved to, just kind of open up the practice. Because I feel like, yeah, if you like this, and like I said, I just feel like this is a part of a big part of our culture and our history and the things that we've experienced. Like, if you're used to your uncle being on the back porch smoking back to back, and that's how you grew up, and you're like, this is a part of your life. You've experienced this.
Right.
So why not take control of it? And it doesn't have to be the 15, 20 blunts a day. Like you said, it's just this, if I feel like it can be beneficial, use the benefits.
Right.
I don't know, for me, growing up in California, especially Northern California, everyone smokes. I mean, it just kind of, before it became popular, it was always here. I know for me, there was a class in the Mission District in San Francisco. I'm like, oh, weed and yoga. I already had a practice. Like, so I didn't have a yoga practice. It was like, Tisha knows, I was like, I don't like yoga. But I was like, I like weed, but I like wellness, weed and yoga. And I thought it looked interesting. So I was like, I'm going to take this class because, I have a practice. And I wasn't sure. I'm like, well, do you bring your own? Do they supply it for you? And like, are we going to be smoking the entire time? So I would love to hear from you, Jay. How do you set up your class? So, because people are probably questioning the same thing I was questioning.
Right. And that's probably the most common question that I do get is, we're not smoking the whole time, right? Thank you. But basically how we do it is, you have three chances during the class to smoke. I lead that. It starts in the very beginning because it's an intentional practice. So just like infusing the practices and the pillars of yoga, like, yoga is very unifying. And that is why, as a class, as a community, as a group, I'll lead them in that first initial, let's all smoke together. And then halfway through the sequence, I'd say, halfway through the sequence, I check in with them, just be like, hey, how's everybody feeling? Are we all good? Because I learned to do that because at one point in my one of my classes, one girl became very overwhelmed with like the THC, the pre-roll that she had, and she became very uncomfortable. That was something that was really important to just be mindful of. And then the last time before they go into their full sequence, the full like meditation sound bath, at the very end, then I offer them, hey, if you would like to spark up something else again before we go into our meditation and sound bath, go right ahead. You're free. I always tell them you're free to do it, even if you're, throughout the entire class if you want to. I do not encourage that because I want you to still be present, but also like, again, intentional, and know that like, if you have a good pre-roll, you don't need to do that the whole time. If that's something that you're comfortable doing, especially a lot of the people that come to my class, this is their first time. So it's even more important for me to be like, you got 3 times that I'm going to lead you into, and that's it. If you choose to do more than that, you are more than welcome, but just know that this is not for you to feel overwhelmed. This is about movement. This is about deepening your poses in certain instances, and just allowing you to kind of really shut your mind off for a little while and focus on being present. And a lot of times when people get that experience, they're like, oh, I like that. Like I was really able to kind of focus in and feel good in the pose, as opposed to worrying about, oh my gosh, like everything else that's going on around me. And then the meditation, by the time they get to the meditation, and like my husband with like the sound bowls, they're just like, I just want to like stay here and lay down and just, I don't want to leave. And that's like, good, we did our job. Your nervous system has kicked in now. And now you can fully relax. And usually by then they're like, sign me up for the next class. So that's usually how I kind of go about leading them through different, through the class, basically.
And I think that is awesome. Have you noticed, or have people discussed the concept of feeling a difference in the sound bowls in a medicated versus not medicated situation?
They have, and I love it because they feel like I feel it literally head to toe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the vibrations, it's the sound, it's the space, knowing that they're in a safe space and they're around other people that are like-minded individuals that are like, I don't feel judged. It's okay. Like, yeah, I feel good. And the main thing that I get from people is like, oh, I literally felt the pulsing. Like I felt like I was kind of like in an outer body experience, but in a good way. Like, oh my goodness, like I literally felt like I was hovering. I felt completely relaxed. And I'm like, yes, yes, I love that for you. But it makes them feel like safe to know that like, oh, I can get myself here. And this is a tool that's going to help me to get there, because I feel like a lot of people are looking for that in their meditation, but they don't know how to achieve it. And I feel like a lot of that is because their mind is just going at 100 miles per hour. And so I'm like, maybe some help, whether it's CBD, THC, whatever, to kind of help your mind to kind of shut down, close off all the outside that you deal with on a daily basis, and really, really tap into like your inner self and your inner talk, and really just pay attention to what it is that your mental needs, your physical needs. And that's why I love THC, because it helps you to kind of do that.
That's great. I mean, I don't use it for yoga anymore, just because the type of yoga that I do, which is Kundalini yoga, and I was talking to Sasha about this, it didn't match. It didn't mix. It was like mixing hypnotic with some other crazy thing. Maybe I'm aging myself, but yes, that was a really bad mix, whatever it was. And so I had to stop my practice, because I used to use it for the exact same reasons. Like I would go to sound baths all the time. I would do it edible, and I would go deeper. But when I was using it with this other practice, I felt like we're over, this is too much energy, and I couldn't do it. So I do think it matters what type of yoga you're doing.
It does. That's a very good point. Like it really does. I feel like you should only be using it through like a meditative sound bath experience or restorative yoga. Or very, like for my class is very like a gentle flow. Like you're only going to get 5 or 6 poses of like standing, getting up, and then the most of it is going to be deep hands-on, like deep assisted stretching. So myself, my partner, and then a third person usually comes around the class, depending on how large the class is. And we're like just letting you sit in the pose for like 1 to 3 minutes and experience that sensation, and then offering like hands-on adjusting as needed, deepening certain stretches if you're in a deeply relaxed space, and like, hey, let me massage your neck, open up your traps. And that's where like the anatomy, certain things like that come into play for me. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Like my body needed it. And I'm like, yes. But doing anything, like you said, Danielle, with like Kundalini yoga or like a hot yoga or like even a general vinyasa, that's not the appropriate time to utilize that.
I couldn't even imagine doing hot yoga and being high.
I learned my lesson. I'll just say that. I learned my lesson.
I'm like,
and that's like I need to really look at how I'm curating these classes, because I don't want people passing out, being completely overwhelmed and be like, this is too much. Like, and that's literally like what happened early on when I first started teaching. And I realized like, this needs to be a specific usage for specific things. And I have to do it based on the type of yoga that I'm doing. Not anything where it's going to be a lot of movement, because a lot of people, especially in the beginning, can't handle that. And it's just too much energy wise.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who's interested in starting to mix weed and yoga for the first time?
Start slow, microdose. I think microdosing is going to be important because it does like affect people differently. Some people can handle a lot of movement while they're high. Some people cannot. And if you're one of those people that is like, I don't know, microdose first. Start off with tea, get like an infused honey. Mm-hmm. Like do things like that as opposed to smoking a whole joint and then expecting yourself to like practice as normal. Because if it's not realistic to do that. And some people are like, oh, I can handle myself. I'm like, no, but this is movement and weed is two totally different things. Mm-hmm. And I think to err on the side of caution is best. So I always tell people microdose first when they're starting. Go to a class. If you can find somebody in your area, if you're in a state where it is recreational, find a class with somebody that you trust. If it is not, then there's online tools that I like to tell people to utilize. But ultimately, yeah, I always say if you're not able to access these things, then microdose and start slow. And I always say tea is the best way to kind of relax you in general. So find some like an infused honey and start there and see how you feel. And then you're like, oh, I might need a little bit more, then kind of grow upon that. And that's how I would like tell people to kind of like start that journey. So at least you know you're safe.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, honestly, so as I said, I was a math teacher, right? I've told you guys that before. So people come to me like, all right, so how much should I take? Because I know, and I'm like, this isn't Breaking Bad, but but I say the same thing. Like, if you haven't done this, especially when it comes to the difference between smoking and edibles, you could take 1 or 2 hits and if you don't smoke, you're great for like 2 days, right? So why do you think you need to eat this whole cookie or whole brownie?
Because that's what you do with it. If it was not a weed brownie, people, they see the sweet and they're like, oh, bad. Yep. I mean, or you'd be like me, and we've had this conversation. I used to microdose, and so I would like get some chocolate or pretzels, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, this piece should be fine, and this piece of chocolate will be fine. And then right after I put it in my mouth, I was like, I should have half that. I'm gonna pay for this later. And I've literally been in my bed like, don't call 911. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. Yeah.
It's true. And I think the concern with it sometimes too is also not knowing the person, because a lot of people think more is best when it comes to like the dosaging. And that has been very much a problem that I've found as well. Like more is not good. With edibles, it goes right into your bloodstream much faster. So as opposed to inhaling, people think it's the same thing. And I'm like, you don't know how much people put in this, because I don't feel like people are very familiar with dosages.
No.
No. I also think that people don't know their body. I think that's the big issue with this, is that people don't know what works for their body, so they don't know
Mm-hmm.
how much to do or not to do.
Right, right. And I think that's why more education needs to be had. Like, even for my classes now, I've started being mindful of the type of strains that I utilize, and
Mm.
then giving people a breakdown with little cards, on each of their mats with like, this is a strain that you are smoking. These are the effects that the strain is going to have, so that they know what's in the and they know what to expect.
Mm.
So it's like little things like that that kind of help to kind of push it over to like the next edge, because it's like, hey, okay, this person is being weary of like, hey, like, everyone's going to react differently, and if you don't like these effects, then you probably should bring your own. So that's why I tell people BYOB is fine, but because at least you know what you're expecting with your own stuff. But we do have a pre-roll. This is the strain that we're using, and this is the breakdown, and this is the percentage of THC, the CBD, or if it's all that stuff. So I try to give people as much information as possible.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it already, like that you share the information about the strain, and I think that that's really smart. Especially because people often just see it all as the same thing, or they don't really,
Yeah.
if they're not into it, they don't look into it. Um,
Right.
and we're really just crossing the lines now of legality, it becoming more accessible, more legal.
Mhm.
How do you, and I guess have you navigated like the legal and ethical complexities of teaching a weed-based yoga class, right? Because everybody's not going to react the same way. It's going to have effects. Like how does that feel for you?
For me now, it's made me just pay more attention. Obviously, like, I have like my liability insurance is like very big, and so like when I do these events, like I up my liability insurance that much more, just to make sure that I'm covered, but also the space is covered. And so I think with all the like the states that are coming into like the recreational phase, and they're really trying to figure out like how that works, like the legal aspect of it, because if something does happen to somebody, then who is responsible? And so for me, you have to have liability insurance. Like, it's a must, especially if you're going to be curating events of this nature. You have to have liability insurance. So I make people sign waivers all the time. I let them know like, hey, like, this is what's your experience could be, so that they know like, okay, like, I need to like be mindful and be careful. But it's really hard to, and I know that like for a lot of states, they're really trying to figure out like, how do we, I guess, monitor that so that people are safe. Because I know in New York, like, there's been so many like people just like going off like and doing like bootleg stuff and adding stuff to like people's weed. So it's really hard to kind of like monitor that. But I think as long as you're doing as much of your own due diligence as you can, that's all you can do. I try to work with companies as well that like I know have like certificates of authenticity. I have my products, my CBD products, I get them tested to a third party lab and get a certificate of authenticity to prove this is what's in my stuff. So if I'm offering like CBD solves to people so they can utilize that as a topical means, then they have that as well, so that they know, oh, look, I have like third party backing and they confirmed it, and I have all my paperwork to prove that this is what you're getting. So it's that too. And I understand like all that is extra costs, out of pocket costs, but it's important if you're going to be running a business in general that involves anything cannabis related. You have to have that like extra push, or extra not the extra push, you have to have that extra something backing you to make sure that you're legit.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. I think that not everyone has that mentality that you have, but I think that's also what sets you apart from other people. Not
Mhm.
only are you teaching this in a way that, hey, not let's just come get high and do yoga, you're kind of like, how can we help you deepen your practice, get out of your mind? Oh, wait, I also have the research to go back with this, and I make sure that the products that I sell are scientifically certified.
Right,
That would make me
right,
be like, if I was in Jersey, I'm like, I'm taking her class because I'm gonna feel safe. And I know
right.
today is 418. I don't know how Jersey does it, but in California, 420 is in San Francisco. It literally is a holiday. You can actually see the smoke in the air. I'm not even
Wow.
joking because like if you go anywhere near Golden Gate Park, it's just a high festival, literally.
Ooh, wow.
So if this is your thing, you need to come out here one year because it's as big as any other holiday.
Right,
It is a
right.
holiday here. So I'm assuming you're doing a class maybe on 420, or how can people connect with you? Like, yeah, how can people connect with you?
Everything is on my Instagram at J_sports therapy. And I post all my classes there. It's at the same studio where I teach my weekly classes. So if you have any questions, I always tell people, please DM me. I put as much information on my Eventbrite for the class, for my elevated class as possible. But I love when people ask me questions because it just kind of like helps to reinforce like you're going to be okay and you're working with somebody who is going to make sure that you're okay. Like even just first aid things, just like, do you need like an Advil or a Motrin? Like, are you starting to get a headache? This might not be working for you. Let's try another option for you instead. Or let's just not do anything else because I don't want you to harm yourself because you have to go home and make your way home after. So like I'm very much comfortable with intervening when I need to like tell people like I think you've had enough. That's enough because you have to still make it home, and I don't want to have that on my conscience, and I don't want anything to happen to you. That's a domino effect. So it's really about ensuring people's safety in these events, as opposed to just going off and just having yes, you're going to enjoy yourself, but I want to make sure that you're safe.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that you're safe. And it's because I'm the one leading and facilitating this, it's that much more my responsibility to make sure that like everybody within this space is safe and okay. So you really have to just be on point with your stuff, is what I tell people.
Fantabulous.
Right. And the classes that you teach, they're still at I'm So Yoga Newark.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to pause real quick. Give
Mhm.
another shout out. If you are in New Jersey and you're looking for a Black owned studio to go to, I'm So Yoga Newark. World Chill Out is a boss. He's so sweet. Um, and Jay teaches there. I have a friend Nana who teaches couple classes there. I know several people that are connected to this space. So again, if you're looking for a Black owned studio, whether you are brown or not, if you're looking for a Black owned studio, check out I'm So Yoga Newark. And all of their classes. Obviously, Jay's information is going to be down below. I'll also put in that as long as he approves, which I'm sure he will. And you'll be able to find those resources down below. Are there any other resources or things like that that you can offer or suggest any ideas for people that are looking to start, or maybe just a gem, that are looking to get started
Uh,
infusing cannabis in their practice?
I would say, ooh, because it's finding those communities, and I know that can be like the trickier part of this is finding those communities because the stigma associated with it. I always say like go on Eventbrite. Eventbrite can be great, but Event High, EHI, is basically the cannabis version of Eventbrite. And they have all kinds of events, wellness related events. There was a cannabis spot expo that's how I came across their website. And it was like, oh my God, it's a whole place, a website where it's just specifically for elevated events of all kinds. So I would say start there. Start at eventhigh.com and type in your city and see what's around locally and go to those events, go to the wellness events, go to whatever it is that's going on so that you can start to gain those knowledge and meet people in your area that have reputable businesses and are able to help you garner more information.
Thank you so much. All of this was very helpful, very enlightening and elevating,
Elevating.
if you will. Thank you so much again, Jay. And we hope you have an amazing event on 420. Happy early 420, everybody. And
Yes.
we will see you soon.
All right.
Thank you, ladies, so much. This was amazing.
Ciao. Thank you for joining us today on Black on the Mat.
Let's continue connecting, sharing our stories, and sowing the benefits of having a yoga practice in your life.
Subscribe to Black on the Mat on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
I'm Seisha, and you can find me at Thick Thigh Yoga on all social media platforms and thickthighyoga.com.
I'm Danielle, and you can find me at HelloWell with Danielle on IG, YouTube, and HelloWellWithDanielle.com.